there, everybody. It is Dr. Devin, and it is time for another episode of If They Knew. I can't wait. I love these conversations because I never know what's going to come up, but I know that on the other side of the conversation, there is a healthier me, a happier me, a more whole version of me, because you never know what spending a few minutes in conversation with another person, another warrior, another bright-souled human can do to take your life, your love, your experience in this grand adventure to the next level. So if you're ready, it's go time. Hey everybody, it is Dr. Devin, and I get to host another one of my fabulous practice members who I have gotten to know over the last few years, that I have watched grow and blossom in ways that I'm excited to learn more about myself today. Please welcome Miss Diane Sherwood to If They Knew.
Well, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this topic. I think the world needs more of it. You and I touch on it when I get to see you in the office, but this will let us really open it. First of all, though, for anybody tuning in, give them that little elevator pitch of who you are and what you do. Who's Diane?
My name is Diane Sherwood. I'm in Wichita, Kansas. I created a new job title for myself. I call myself a Forgiveness Practitioner. And what I do is I teach people how to forgive.
That's a big deal. Now, in your, we'll say, former career, I know you're not maybe all the way out of it yet, but what did you do previously?
So for 25 years, I've been a family law attorney with a master's in social work. I started out as a custody mediator in 1996, and I've worked with the most highly conflicted families in Sedgwick County. And then about 2005, I started practicing law and taking on clients as their advocate. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I found this class that was offered out of California for how to coach people into forgiveness.
Timely in so many different ways. But to go from the world that you were in, there's obviously a lot of conflict, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yes.
So as an understatement.
Right. So you were primed for 25 years to learn the value and the impact of something like forgiveness. So when I invite people on, I always ask them, like, there's a lot of things that I bet you and I could chew through, but it comes down to some big premise, some big ideas that have changed your perspective on the world, right? So what's the one thing about forgiveness that you wish more people knew?
What I like to say is the magic of forgiveness is the healing of yourself. So that forgiveness really isn't about anyone else but you. And once you learn how to reach forgiveness in yourself, you heal, and no one else has the power to upset you again. It's a crazy, crazy premise.
It's freedom, right? I mean,
freedom and also power. When in 1980, I studied in Chicago, and we studied power. And it gets back to what I did in 1980. Forgiveness is power. And it's personal power. It's freedom from the, I don't know how to say this, harassment of others, that no one else has the power over you that you've given them in your entire life.
So you've probably, in all these studies, and you are a forgiveness practitioner, but those of us that become practitioners usually have to walk the walk and live this stuff first, right? So how has this impacted you personally?
So I went to a conference in 2018 where this woman who teaches this was a keynote speaker, and I got on her mailing list, and I never could bring myself to go out for her $2,500 weekend in California, because then I had to buy tickets and hotels and food. And I'm like, oh, I can't afford that. But when she said, now we're doing it by Zoom, I called her and she said, well, you have to go through the work yourself. And all of a sudden my stomach clenched up and I got really nervous. And I'm like, that made me nervous. And she said, why? I said, who am I going to be without this fire in my belly? And she said, wouldn't that be interesting to find out? And I went, And she said, but forgiveness is a choice. You don't have to forgive. And as soon as I learned I didn't have to forgive, then I was willing to do it. Nobody's going to make me forgive. Are you kidding me? And then we spent the first semester going through it ourselves. And it is a kind of scary thing because I had to keep interacting. So usually it's a person, but sometimes it's a thing, like you're mad at the government. So I call it the object of our anger. And the object of my anger was a person, but I had to keep interacting with that person while I was learning to forgive that person. And the first time I had to do it, I'm like, that was really bizarre. And my teacher said, yeah, when you change, the ripple effect changes them and they don't understand what just happened. And so that was like November of 2020. August of 2021, I spent the whole weekend with my object of anger and I was just fine. It was crazy, but it works. So then we go through the second semester. And what I learned there is that if you have one object of anger, you probably have more. And so then we had to go through it again. And I picked my second object and went through it again. And even just recently, I got upset and realized I had a third one. And so, the beauty of this is that it's continual self-discovery. But once you learn the process of forgiveness, then you can go back anytime you're upset and put yourself through that process again.
Yeah. And it gives you tangible tools. I mean, I'm sure she just mentioned that some people might be mad at the government. I just can't imagine.
No.
I think there's a little bit of anger in the world these days, but I was listening to Wayne Dyer this morning and he said, if you grab an orange and you squeeze it, what comes out? Juice. What kind of juice? Orange juice every time, right? It's not going to be apple juice. It's never going to be mango juice. It's always going to be orange juice. So whatever is in us is going to come out when we're squeezed. And so I'm sure you're learning that like taking yourself through this process continually just adds more and more power, more and more depth of compassion and joy and freedom and all those good feeling things because you're clearing that space out.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. Now take people. So for anybody listening out there that might have an object of anger, whether it's somebody or something, or, objects out in the world these days, take us into some tactical, practical things that they can do. Number one, I'm sure, is to come see you. But what are some other things?
So I skipped that one on purpose when I was going through this. But the first book that changed my life, and I listened to it before I signed up for I listened to her 1 hour Zoom before I signed up for the class. She was interviewing a man who told us about a book called The Four Agreements. And so then when you get into the class, we study the book called Forgive for Good by Fred Luskin. And we went through a process by Michael Brown called The Presence Process. These are all 3 books. And I hate to be this honest, but let me be this honest. You can read those 3 books and know everything I'm going to teach you. But like any good class, I mean, just because I signed up for a class in college, I buy the books. You really need someone to guide you through them. That's it. But those 3 books are the foundation of what we do. And it is, if you want to short circuit the process, go on Amazon, order The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, Forgive for Good by Dr. Fred Luskin, and The Presence Process by Michael Brown. So you may not need me.
Well, but it's like, we all know that we need to eat right and exercise. We all know the things, the staples of what we need to do, but sometimes we need some accountability and guidance to see ourselves when we don't see it clearly. Because maybe it's possible, which I'm sure you've seen over the years of in law and family court, there's, sometimes the problem is us and we can't see our way through it without some, like you said, a guide to nudge us.
So let me give you another practical tip.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that started to work for me. Sit down and write out what angers you. And it doesn't matter if you write it or type it, but write it out and don't leave anything out. Put in all of your anger, purge that from your soul. And sometimes your brain sees a solution that you did not previously see.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what happened to me. I started writing my thing and I realized that I couldn't speak to my object of anger, but I could speak to somebody else and solve it a different way. And so that particular issue, I got solved a different way because I had written it out and my brain saw a different answer.
I love
So
that.
if you want to start and if you can write it out and your brain sees the answer, sometimes that's all it takes.
That healing from within, and it's an
Yes,
inside out job.
And it really is, sometimes, and we call it your wise one gets it and speaks to you.
I love that.
Your wise one comes in and says, hey, now that I've seen you write this down, why don't we try this? And you're like, oh, my wise one's a genius.
There is that inner guidance that's with us all the time. I keep looking at this painting that you have behind you. Can you talk to me about that? What do you see up there?
Well, is everybody going to be able to see this? Because if you can't see it, I need to describe it.
Well, so if you're on video, if we're on YouTube right now, they can see it. But for those of you listening on Apple Podcast or Lipson, I'm looking at a beautiful painting of a lion and a lamb lying peacefully by one another.
And so that picture I bought at my church. We have in our office, we display artists' work that are for sale, and I bought it. It is in my mediation room. And so when I'm in my mediation room, I sit in this chair and my litigants sit facing that picture. And the whole purpose of that picture is to subliminally communicate that when the lion can lay down with the lamb, peace can be achieved.
And that's everything we're talking about, right? But
exactly,
it's acknowledging that we have a lion and a lamb within us, right? That need to make peace with one another. There's that soft version and maybe a little bit of anger in those of us. Are there any other tools or books or hints for those of us that get brave enough to do the forgiveness work that has aided you along the way?
Well, the main thing that I can tell you is that when you do that, when you do your work, you don't lose the fire in your belly. You learn to breathe at the right times, and you learn to step away from the conflict and examine it from a different angle. You learn to respond instead of react. And all of that is in the 3 books that I suggested to you. It is just, it's more than just changing your perspective. A friend said to me, so you're just a therapist, right? I said, I am not a therapist. Now I'm a trained therapist. I've got my master's in social work, but I'm not a licensed therapist. And what I do, although it's therapeutic, is not therapy. Because what we do is I teach you a laser focused process by which to solve some problems. And it only lasts 10 to 15 weeks. So if we get to week 15, we're done. And if you need therapy, I will refer you, or you can go to a therapist of your choice.
And those people listen, I mean, anybody who has, read any self-development books or gone to any Tony Robbins type seminars, this isn't like a one and done thing, right? It is an ongoing healing process that doesn't happen overnight. So you said 10 to 15 weeks. For anybody listening that does want to come connect with you, we'll get to how they connect with you, but walk us through what a course with you would look like.
So there's 2 ways, and the 10 to 15 weeks is an individual program where I start you and I give you the 4 agreements, and then we talk about that. It comes with a workbook, which I can't give to you until you sign up to, but it's 12 steps. And she created, her name is Eileen Barker, at the pathofforgiveness.com. She created a 12 steps program. I don't really like the idea of a 12-step program, but I understand, having studied that, how they go hand in hand. And that's why I said 10 to 15. But we go through a workbook based on the Fred Luskin book and the Michael Brown book. And so we start by, and it's called creating an inventory. What are you upset about? Then we pick one object to work on. And so then I have you write the story, just like I suggested to you a bit ago. And then I say, now we're going to deconstruct the story. Let's talk about the pieces of the story that are in play here. Mm-hmm. And then step 4 is, let's consider the impact. Do you want to keep living this life? Are you ready to shed it? Mm-hmm. And then step 5 is where we really do the crux of the work. And it's finding what we call the emotional signature and your core wounds that were created probably ages 0 to 7, not necessarily. And then we take you out the backside of that. So that's, once we get there, that's where the real healing occurs. Mm-hmm. And then we start saying, well, let's look at the perspective of this. Is there any good that came from this? Is there a gift? Are you ready to forgive? Mm-hmm. When we deconstruct your story, we say, now we're going to set the object of your anger aside and look at the message that person was sending you. Mm-hmm. And then we bring them back in on the backside. Now that you've understood how you got to this place, are you ready to forgive them? And the answer doesn't have to be yes. Right. But then we take it a step forward and we say, are you ready to forgive yourself? Because when someone can get you that mad, it usually triggers you to do things that you're not really proud of. And then you have to forgive yourself for even if it's just a minuscule portion of that. Mm-hmm. Are you ready to forgive yourself now? And then we rewrite your story. And we create a new story for you to carry around that's not based on the old stuff. And then we integrate it. We have an integration process, and then we have a completion ritual. And so it's a really deep dive into step 5, and then we bring you out in like a butterfly out of your chrysalis. Now, the second way, before I go, I've created a class that I do in 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And it's 5 hours at a time. And I only take you through steps 1 through 7. Are you ready to forgive? But I use a lot of the 4 agreements. I do something called chakra energy, a component, a couple of hours on that one night. And then at the back end, I teach people the Hawaiian forgiveness and healing process of Ho'oponopono. So that's a 3, we do it 5 hours at a time, like a Saturday. And I'm getting ready to start that this fall.
Is this individual or group?
It's group. Mm-hmm. The 3-week program is a group program. My goal would be to have 10 or 20 people at a time. I would do it with less. And somebody said, oh, you're not thinking nearly big enough. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm starting my first class in November.
Yeah. And I see it in community acupuncture. I see it at different events that we go to. There's real power in healing in community and getting to see that we're not all that different from one another, right? That we all carry a lot of these similar things together. Now, if we apply this, right, we went real practical and looked at it up close. Now, if we zoom out and say we could just like fairy godmother the world and everybody would just understand how great forgiveness is, how would that change the landscape of the world that we're living in? What type of impact could this have?
So if we could all heal our core wounds through this emotional signature, what you would find is that almost no one has the ability to anger you any longer. And if there were no anger in the world, we would be in peace. Mm. Now, I tell people, so my son used to be very messy in high school, and I would say, how do you give birth to this beautiful baby boy and raise a pig? He when I clean his room, he'd say, Mom, I don't like my room clean. But therein lies how we got to where we are, right? Everybody is born emotionally whole. Mm. And so if we could heal all of the pain that we went through, and the study shows 0 to 7, but even if it's 0 to 18, even if it's 0 to 50, I mean, there's no magic number. If you could go back and heal all that pain, you would be back to the baby you were born and you would be perfect.
Oh, what a world it could be.
Right?
Worth chasing, worth playing. And like you know, I love where you talk through the steps and healing yourself, because that type of personal power, that responsibility, you know, we're talking forgiveness, happiness, we're talking in emotional terms, but I understand that has massive impact on your physical health, right?
Yes.
I mean, we now know the roots of a lot of diseases are emotional. And so if we're in chronic stress, if we're in fight or flight, if we're constantly anger driven, and I remember being in China and who we were learning from with acupuncture and Chinese medicine, he said, you know, cancer in your culture, in the Western world, one of the main sources of that is anger and the inability to forgive. And so this could, and I think should be, part of healing chronic disease for sure.
You know, the book, The Presence Process, he wrote that book because he was in chronic pain, and he learned how to allow his body to heal itself. And then he thought, well, I'll do these seminars, but it can't be done by seminar. Mm-hmm. And so he wrote the book, and he said, this is really a self-healing book. And we use it, and it's a 10-week process inside that book. And he says, if you're going to start, don't stop. And if you're going to stop, don't start. Mm. And you just need that person that when things get tough, they hold you accountable so that you can heal.
Mm. I love it. I love it so much. Now, for those people that want to reach out to you, I'm going to have links to all of your things, but tell them, where do they find you if they have more questions on this?
So my website is peaceandforgiveness.com, and it will take you to the Center for Peace and Forgiveness, my organization, my company. And on Facebook every Monday at the Center for Peace and Forgiveness, I do 15 minutes live Monday at 6 p.m. So certainly you don't need to be there Monday at 6 p.m. Most people check in later. And then my phone number is 316-26-PEACE, 267-3223.
I love it. Write that down. Make sure that that's on there. Do you have any other calls to action or messages of hope for humanity in such a time as this?
Let's see what I want to say. You know, really, in final thoughts, I wrote down, if they knew about the power of forgiveness and learn the life skill, we would become invincible. Mm.
I wholeheartedly agree. And, you know, if they knew, right? I mean, I think
if they knew,
once you learn and live in this kind of way, you couldn't go back if you tried, could you?
You can always have a choice, but who wants to live like that?
Right. You can't unlearn it. And once you feel the power and the freedom, I would imagine, like to be able to navigate this. I mean, yeah, I love guests like this, and it just is extra special because I've known you pre and post doing all of this work, and watching you literally shine in your light right now of like looking at where 25 years of one world led you into this and the lives that you will now impact. It's immeasurable. So,
well, and once you change, the people around you change. And there's this ripple effect that affects the community that's absolutely magic also.
I love it. It's, you know, and guys, you hear me say all the time on here, the doctor of the future is the patient. And so getting to host people like this that give us real actionable tools and resources and accountability to claim that responsibility and look within and crawl into some of those dark, scary, hurtful places and heal ourselves. There is power and potential beyond measure. So I'm grateful for your time, Diane. I know what a busy, amazing woman you are, and I'll make sure that we get you guys connected to her. And if you heard this and you feel like it would be helpful to somebody else, please share this forward, because now more than ever, you know, we've heard the cliche statement, you know, we're all in this together, and that's a fact. And they don't say united we stand just because we are meant to live in prosperity and peace. And we got to do that one layer of healing at a time. So
Dr. Devin, thank you for having me. I appreciate it beyond measure.
Such a joy. I can't wait to see, as this business grows, because there is a real need for this. So guys, I love you. Please reach out to either one of us. I know I can speak for her here too. Like, if there's anything we can do to support you in your healing process, we may not have the answers, but we can help lay breadcrumbs to the right direction. So thank you, Diane. Thank you, listeners. Sending everybody a big hug, lots of love, and I'll see you soon.
Well, that's a wrap. You have successfully navigated another conversation of if they knew. And if you didn't know before, you know now. I hope that there's something that got shared in this latest conversation that helped wake up and shake up something inside of you, something that takes you closer to healing, something that helps you grow, something that pushes you, supports you, encourages you along your own healing and happiness journey. Because, they were right about one thing. We are in this thing together, and in sharing our stories, in lifting one another up, in shining our light forward, that is how we create the future we all know is possible. So I want to hear if you have any requests. I want to hear what your favorite takeaways were. I hope that you share this with a friend or family member. Come play with me on social. Please reach out to me if there's anything that I can do to support you, or if you have any follow-up questions at all. We are only just getting started, my friends. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Blessings your way. And remember, we were born for such a time as this, and we are expecting miracles. I'll see you soon.